to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Well, welcome to Inside Personal Growth. Sitting on the other side of the screen there, as you can see, is Cynthia Kane. And Cynthia was just on our show, and she did a full podcast about one book called The Pause Principle, how you learn how it can transform your relationships. Cynthia, good day to you. I appreciate you coming back again.
Oh, I'm happy to be back.
And the reason that I had her back is because she had a trilogy of books prior to this book. And do you want to hold those books up for our listeners so that they can see those trilogy? How to meditate like a
How to meditate like a Buddhist, talk to yourself like a Buddhist, and then how to communicate like a Buddhist.
Perfect. So we're going to actually do one podcast here that's going to cover a little bit about all three of these books because they're kind of intertwined. You know, it's really all about Buddhism, but it's really more about how you transform yourself, how you can transform yourself. And I'm going to let them know a little bit about you. She has a company called Kane Intentional Communication Institute, and we'll put a link in the show notes here. But she's the founder of that organization, and it's a leading communication institute that provides services to individuals and companies to improve communication skills. Cynthia used her proprietary process called the Kane Intentional Communication TM Practice to help her students experience more peace so they could show up authentically in the most important relationships. As we said, she's the author of all of these books. She's been featured in Spirituality and Health Magazine, Self Magazine, Thrive, Global, Authority Magazine, The Washington Post, Women's Day, BBC Travel, and the list goes on, Mind, Body, Green. She's been featured in Mindfulness and Meditation Expert in the Great Day, Washington, Good Morning, Arizona, Good Morning, Connecticut, and All About Women. So she's been out there doing it and getting to the media. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Bard College and a Master of Fine Arts degree from Sarah Lawrence College, and she lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, and she says her two kiddos that she actually has to kind of cart around. So we were talking about that last time.
Yeah.
But that's part of being a mother and having a family. So it's really, really important. And, you know, this whole thing around Buddhism, right? So whether it's the Dalai Lama or it's anybody else that people out there have really followed. And I always love every time I see the Dalai Lama. I've seen him in person once in Arizona. How playful and how much laughter always comes out of him. It's like a constant amount of laughter. It's just like he'll end a comment and he'll go, ha, 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 you know, and I'm like, wow, this guy laughs a lot. Tell us how important just being playful and laughing and knowing that whatever it is isn't that serious is when it comes to not just Buddhism, but how all of us should probably spend most of our lives.
Yeah. Well, I think playfulness is a really big part of really being present, right, in our lives, and it helps us become present because we can only laugh when we are in the present moment. We can only create when we're in the present moment, right? And this sense of playfulness, though, is really important because it is not taking ourselves too seriously. We are constantly changing. Our emotions are constantly changing. Everything is impermanent. And so when we kind of look through that lens, things can feel a little lighter sometimes, and we can start to maybe experiment more where before, things may seem more serious and there's only one way to do a thing, right? So we try to lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think the whole concept around, I know when I go to meditation retreats, it comes up for me around wonderment.
Mm,
Just the exploring the world as if you're seeing it from kids' eyes for the first time.
yeah,
It's like
I
we're
agree.
so conditioned in so many ways that, you can look at a petal on a flower and say, wow, how beautiful it is. Well, 95% of the world or more just passes by, or
Yeah.
they don't smell the rose, or they don't take the time to hug a tree. And I know it sounds kind of strange to maybe many people listening, but the reality is these are the kind of things that actually I think bring more peace and more joy into one's
Mm,
life. So
yeah, it is that.
your Buddhist-inspired communication trilogy
Mhm.
has really resonated with thousands of readers. And for all my listeners, you can go get these books on Amazon, um, and we'll put links to all of them in the show notes below. So take a look at that. What personal experiences led you personally to explore Buddhism principles as really this framework for modern communication and self-talk?
Mhm. Well, I didn't know much about Buddhism growing up. I had never studied it or anything, and I didn't really, uh, have an interest until I was given this opportunity to go to a workshop at the Shambhala Institute in New York when I lived there, and that came through because I had lost my first love unexpectedly, and I was really trying to figure out how to enjoy being here again, and really trying to understand how, how to just move through the day to day differently. And when a friend of mine introduced me to this meditation and writing workshop, at the Shambhala Institute, I was trying everything at that time to try to find my way out of this, this darkness that I was really in. And it was that weekend where I learned how to meditate and where I learned the elements of right speech in Buddhism that really transformed me. I mean, it was that aha moment that a lot of people have at some point where this idea of being able to connect in a kind, honest, and helpful way and communicate in a way that was more helpful than hurtful felt like my way out of suffering. Um, and that's really where I was introduced to the concepts of the elements of right speech in Buddhism. And I had been, before this workshop, I had been doing a lot of courses and reading a lot of books and going to a lot of trainings. And communication was a big piece of what I was learning about in terms of changing or transforming or starting to feel better in the world. But I couldn't pinpoint actually how to do it and what I was, you know, like what the actual um, steps were. And so when I was introduced to the elements of right speech, which are to tell the truth, don't exaggerate, don't gossip, and use helpful language, I knew, okay, this is my way out. Like this is how I can actually change how I communicate. But then I had to figure out how to do it, right? How to start speaking in a kind, honest, and helpful way. How to not exaggerate. How to stop gossiping. And so that was really how I was introduced to Buddhism. And that, I mean, that was really that one weekend that completely changed my whole entire trajectory after that.
Well, I mean, in Buddhism, there's the statement that there's going to be, I'll put a paraphrase it, there's going to be pain, but suffering is really the option, right?
Yep.
So, and I think that's a really important statement for people to ponder, right? We're all going to go through life. It isn't going to be without pains. The question is how much do we need to suffer around the pain? That's a choice, a mental
Mhm.
model or construct. And in How to Communicate Like a Buddhist, you introduce what you call the three C's of speaking. Um, and you talk about speaking consciously, concisely, clearly, and your company is really about communicating and listening, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, hey, it's also as much about listening.
Oh, yeah.
Could Could you break down for the listeners what each of these three means in practice? Because even me as a podcaster, sometimes I lose sight of these, right? And it's easy to do when in a conversation because your mind is going, "Oh, I need to speed this along," or "I need to I have to get to the next question," or whatever it might be. And I think there's a lot for me to learn just from what you will have to say here.
Well, so speaking consciously, really what that means is we're starting to pay attention to the language that we're using, right? So we start to pay attention to if our language is helpful, if it's moving the conversation forward. We start to become more conscious of, um, what's happening within us within a conversation. So we're learning more about how our emotions and our thoughts can dictate the way that we interact. So, becoming conscious means we're starting to notice and pay attention to the language that we're using and if it's, if it really is necessary, if it's helpful. And we're also starting to become more conscious of our role within a conversation as well. We can be in a lot of different interactions and take on many different roles within that conversation. So we can choose to be a daughter in a conversation. We can choose to be a friend. We can choose to be, a boss. We can choose to be a teacher. We can choose. And based off of being conscious of what role we're playing, we become more, conscious of the different types of language that we may be using. So becoming more conscious just means really we're starting to be more mindful, paying attention to what we're saying while we're saying it. And we're doing so without evaluation or without judgment. So we're coming really more through this friendliness, right? More of like a gentleness when we're looking and noticing. And then communicating, first it's consciously, then clearly. We want to be clear because vague language just really causes a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding. And so to become clear, really what we start to pay attention to is being very specific with our language. So in conversations, a lot of times we will share information, but we will not be very clear in, for example, we could say, I need this to be into me by the end of the day. But
Hmm.
by the end of the day for me might be 5 p.m., but by the end of the day for you could be 6 p.m., right? So if we get really clear, then there's no room for misunderstanding. So then it would simply be, I would need that into me by 5 p.m. today. 5 p.m. Eastern today. Then the other person understands, okay, that's exactly the same time, right? So
Hmm.
we start to become more clear with our language. And then the last piece is really becoming concise because we can just speak too much. We can over explain, we can dance around, and we will lose the person very, very quickly. And we really want to be able to speak so another person can hear us or can understand us. And to do that means we really need to cut the fat of what we're saying so that, we're speaking less, not more.
Well, and I think, Cynthia, sometimes people get it before they get it.
Mm,
So they get impatient with you because
yes.
here you are doing this. And a lot of times you don't know. What that brings me to this part in Communicate Like a Buddhist, and I want you to explain this because
Mhm.
it's the language of silence.
Yeah.
And okay, so people are like, the language of silence?
Mm.
Is there really language in silence?
There is.
There is. And so what advice would you have about incorporating that into our daily communications?
Well, I think just starting to notice silence in how you use silence in your conversations is important because sometimes we'll use it to power over, to punish, or to push away. But really, what we're looking for is can we start to use silence, bringing it into our conversations by whether it looks like pausing, right? And taking these kind of gaps within your conversation. So you start to practice pausing more in your conversation, but in that silence, what you're looking to do is you're looking to find a way to collaborate more, or you're finding a way to be more helpful, or you're starting to pay attention in the conversation to how you can keep the integrity of the conversation intact. So you bring silence in more to kind of create that space to become present, to check in with yourself, to then be able to express yourself, and expressing yourself in a way that's kind, honest, and helpful. So we use silence to create more intimacy within a conversation or create more connection.
I think it also gives you time. This is just my personal reflection on silence, to contemplate. Um, and maybe contemplate isn't the right word, but I will use it. Contemplate, um, not really what you're going to say, but how you're going to be.
Mhm. I love that. Yes.
Um,
De
so it's like it's an essence in which you carry yourself or you come across. If you give yourself the silence to contemplate that, I think it works out very well.
Mhm.
Um, so now in in your um in your books, your other book is Talk to Yourself Like a Buddhist.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so it's like, hey, the people used to tell me, I wrote a book on intuition, and I said I would hear things. Some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, and I look at it from a spiritual standpoint. I'm being spoken to,
Mhm.
and I have to have the discernment of
Yeah.
what is coming through. So you discuss what you call the unreported epidemic of negative self talk, which, hey, look, it's out there all over the place.
Mhm.
Why do you think we're often harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anybody else? And what a prescription do you have for this negative self talk?
Mm. Well, I think we're harder on ourselves because we don't understand how important we are,
Hmm.
in the sense that we're very outward focused, right? And we're, um, you know, when it comes to people sharing attributes or qualities of others that are really, positive, we always hear about being selfless, and we always hear about giving to others, and, you know, being friendly towards others and being kind towards others. And there's not so much in our, educational system really around taking ourselves into consideration and being kind towards ourselves and being caring towards ourselves. So I think that's one piece of it. I think we don't see that we need to be able to extend that nurturing love and care to ourselves first before we can extend it to other people. And I think it's a matter of shifting that. And a lot of times when working with people, it sounds strange, but I'll often say that what we really have to do is we have to start putting ourselves first, right? We have to start connecting with ourselves first and talking to ourselves first in a kind, honest, and helpful way before we can actually have, kind conversations with other people. But I do think that the first step towards changing the way that we talk to ourselves is starting to notice how we are in this moment, right? So we can pay attention to if the words that we're using are hurtful, if they're causing more anxiety, if they're causing more doubt, causing more fear, then we know that we're talking to ourselves in a way that isn't very helpful. So then the work would be, well, how can I speak to myself in a way that's kind, honest, and helpful, that's more objective, right? So it's
Yeah,
really.
well, so what do you advocate? I mean, meditation, we're going to get to it, but so we're talking about negative self-talk here, but the first thing is self-awareness.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
just said, hey, how are we in the moment? And what I find myself even doing is that it's almost like I'm not even taking that breath.
Yeah.
As we talked about in your other book,
Mhm.
the the breath, how important it would be. And I would think one of the tools that I personally would say that I don't use it enough is to take a deep breath. I've noticed myself even in this interview now taking 2 or 3 deep breaths while you're talking. too, like really realize where I'm at,
Yeah.
right? Does actually paying attention to our breath bring greater self-awareness to the negative self-talk?
It does. Yes, because every time you take a breath, right? What you're noticing is you're in the present moment, right? So our negative self-talk is a distraction. It is it means that anytime we're thinking, we're not in the present moment. So you can use your breath as a way to detach from your thoughts, right? So you can come back into the present moment and then begin again. And the breath is a wonderful way to do that.
You know, I had one author tell me, and he's a doctor and a hypnotherapist, and he said, worry, which is one way you can talk about negative self-talk. Like it's like, hey, I'm worried.
Yeah.
It's misguided imagination.
I love, yes.
Right. I thought it was a great statement. Now, your middle path of self communication includes what you referred to as 5 practices: listening, exploring, questioning, release, and balance. Could you share an example of how those practices might transform a common negative thought pattern? Because some people get into a pattern of I'm not enough
Right.
or I'll never be enough.
Yeah.
And it's one that, you know, if the neural pathway was to be broken, I would say, hey, tapping, breathing, all kinds of things to get you out of this pattern that
Yeah.
you've done. I had an experience with it very early on in my life, in my actually 20s and 30s, of anxiety attacks. And they were so severe that I ended up going and getting electrodes on my head. And I really realized that through meditation, I could control them. Right. And then they went away completely. But they were so severe that at times I was housebound.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think people need to understand how powerful this really is. Right. The breathing.
Yeah.
Any technique that works for you, but reality, I think breathing is one of them, because once you slow down and you notice your breathing, you also realize how you're talking to yourself.
Yeah. Because you're slowing everything down, so you're becoming more aware and paying attention,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when we look at, let's say, this idea of not being good enough, we start listening to that. So that's the first piece, right? You're listening and you're saying, oh, there I am. I'm talking to myself in a way that's unhelpful, that's hurtful, right? And then it's a bit about, well, where does this actually come from, right? Is this my voice, or is this a voice that comes from the past? Is it my mother's voice? Is it my father's voice? Is it my sister's voice? Is it my teacher's voice? My partner's voice, right? Or is this really mine? And so we explore a little bit to understand, is this a label that I gave myself, because of an experience that I had when I was 7? So we start to see that maybe this isn't true, right? So first we hear it, then we explore it a little bit. And then the questions are really, is this true? Is what I'm saying to myself true?
Sounds like Byron Katie.
A little, right?
She
It
used
is
to ask
different.
people, is it true? Is it really true? Because, I said, we live in the MSU, the world of making stuff up and then believing what we make up and then living what we made up.
Yeah.
Right. And so to break the pattern of MSU, and I would be nice here making shit up. But the reality is that we make up stories all the time, but we don't realize it.
Right.
But we believe that's true.
Yeah.
But it's really not true, because if you ask anybody else from the outside, they would go, what are you talking about? A lot of times that's what they would say.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really is, can we see clearly in this moment,
Right.
right? Can we identify this isn't actually a story that's a real story? This is something that I'm just telling myself because I feel this way, or there's a label, or there's scarcity, or, whatever it might be. And then we have to forgive ourselves for talking to ourselves in a difficult way, in a hurtful way. and then we can release it. So, there's also different practices that we do, like meditation, to be very helpful. Meta meditation is a wonderful meditation that we can do to help with negative self-talk, because meta meditation is really all about extending more compassion towards ourselves and seeing ourselves as somebody that we want to care for and be kind to, right? And so that then changes the way we end up talking to ourselves. So meditation is a great tool for it as well. Breathing practices, tapping, right? All the phrasing of, even though I'm, feeling insecure right now, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even just saying that phrase to ourselves relaxes us, potentially loosens us up to
So
see.
are you saying an affirmation or mantra? So
Mantras
they
can
have
help.
a mantra prior to that. I mean, I noticed in your wording above, I don't think it meant transcendental meditation, but you had TM. It was TM around a process that you'd come up with.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
ain't trademarked, but
Yeah.
for a
Trademark.
minute there, I was thinking, oh, she's using transcendental meditation.
No, 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 no. I want to be very clear. I don't use transcendental meditation. No.
Okay. So that's good to know. It's
Yeah.
good to know. So look, there's a lot of beginners out there. There's a lot of people that have never practiced it. It always amazes me when I tell people, hey, do you meditate or do you do this? And they'll say, no, I've never done it. And I'm afraid of it, or
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
not something that's part of the religious background that I came from.
Mhm.
So for beginners who are intimidated by meditation, what simple practice for the how to meditate like a Buddhist would you recommend as an entry point? I mean, I've heard um, we had Dr. Brantley on here from Duke University
Mhm.
who wrote all these 5-minute meditation books. I mean, he was
Mhm.
famous for the 5-minute meditation series. Um, and I know frequently authors like yourself will say, hey, start off with 3 or 5 minutes. Don't even do that. Do it while you're in the car or do a walking meditation or do whatever. What would you recommend if you were speaking to someone right now who's never done it before and is like, okay, I really want to try something to see if I can break this negative
Mhm.
self-talk?
So I would do long, slow, deep breathing as a meditation, which means you're inhaling to the top, then you're exhaling and you're silently saying to yourself, 1. And then you're going to inhale and exhale and silently say 2. Then you're going to inhale and exhale. You're going to go up to 10. And that's what I would start with. Because I think sometimes meditation does have this really overwhelming, um, like it feels really, really big. And so it's important for us to see that it is a simple practice. It doesn't have to be sitting for very long amounts of time. It really can just be counting our breaths, right, to begin with, or even just taking 5 long, slow, deep inhales and exhales in the morning, just to start understanding and seeing the changes just from those small, you know, those small
What
practices.
what obstacles did Cynthia Kane face when she first started? How did you
Oh,
have
I mean, I faced all the obstacles. I mean,
the
I
monkey mind was really bad, huh?
oh, yeah, it was everywhere. I'm like, "Why am I doing this? What is happening? Am I doing this right?" I would fall asleep all the time. I would, I mean, I would be bored, I'd be restless. I mean, I would really fall into all of the obstacles for
Your
sure.
to-do list would come into your head
Oh,
thinking,
yeah.
"Why am I sitting here when I should be going to get the kids or doing
Yes.
this or doing"
And then, like, sensation in the body, "Oh, my leg just stayed. I have a scratch. Do I itch it?" Like, I mean, my mind was, everywhere. I'd never ever sat by myself before, you
So
know?
what were in your humble opinion, as someone who's written 3 books now on Buddhist practices, how did you overcome all of those obstacles which we've all faced,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I happen to be part of Self-Realization Fellowship, and they will have 6-hour meditations. Now,
Wow.
it's very challenging. I never have done one. I'm going to be honest with everybody out there. It's like,
That would scare me.
I've never made it through 6 hours. And granted, they take breaks.
Okay.
They kind of do take some
Like
breaks.
water,
But
bathrooms. Yeah.
but the challenge is that you don't need to look at it as that extreme.
Right.
You need to look at it as a way to slow you down, to recalibrate your body. And so what did you do to recalibrate your body so that it started to accept the 2 minutes, the 3 minutes, the 5 minutes, and so that you got to a point where, maybe, I know for me, at the peaks of meditation, at my crown chakra, I get this pulsating purple going in and out, in and out, and in. And to me, when I can get there, I'm like, whoa, this is a whole new. I'm like, man, how did I get here? This is like I went out of body.
Yeah, in the gap.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think for for me, even though it was challenging, I could tell that something was different within me. I could feel a difference. And so that's what kept me coming back. But it was more allow seeing if the practice for me became allowing my mind to be wild and crazy,
Mm.
right? It was like, okay, I'm not going to resist what is happening here. I'm actually going to see, can I sit beside what's happening here? So I have all these thoughts running around. That's okay. It's okay to have thoughts. So that's what I would tell myself, right? When I'm sitting there and I'm meditating and all of the thoughts are coming in and I'm like, oh, stop. Like this isn't, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be quieting my mind. But the reality is that we cannot quiet our mind, right? We are seeing and noticing and observing. And if we can allow our thoughts to be there, that's actually when they start to leave, right? And it's the same thing when the emotion would come, like big emotion. I remember this one time having anxiety within the meditation, and it was so uncomfortable, and I wanted to just stop, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna play with this," right? Kind of back to that playfulness piece that you talked about in the beginning. I'm gonna see, like, can I play with this? Can I allow this to be here? Can I turn my attention towards it and follow the anxiety in my body? And then it started to change, the texture of it started to change, and then felt it leave the body. And so it became more like a playfulness practice for me to see, can I allow myself to have whatever experience I'm having in meditation, and can that be okay? And that was really liberating for me because I had not ever in my life really allowed myself to be however I was and it'd be okay, because there was always judgment and evaluation and negative self-talk. And so the moment that I gave that myself permission in the meditation to do that, it was almost like I was giving myself permission to be kind to myself.
You know, what you just stated is so important. I think if you can be an observer of self, right?
Yeah.
Meaning like, okay, here's my body over here. I'm out here. There's another one of me. Just be okay with the monkey mind playing through
Yeah.
everything it's going to do. And once you get there, after you get past this for a while, as you said, it starts to slow down.
Mhm.
It starts to tune out.
Yeah.
You start to tune in.
Yes.
You go deeper inward than you've ever been before. And that's where you have um, an amazing experience. I'm not saying you're going to have a Satori experience, but
Right.
the reality is,
You'll be able to sit for longer at that point.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because even uh, me, I think in my whole existence here in 70 years, I've only had maybe one or two Satori experiences where you actually felt like you were one with everything. Like it was just like, wow, what's going on? And
Mhm.
don't have an expectation of that.
Right.
The point is don't try to meditate toward that. Just allow that to happen and be, you know.
Yeah.
So look, you've written these 3 books on
Mhm.
Buddhist-inspired communications and mindfulness practices. So, for Cynthia, what surprised you the most about how the readers of these books, because these aren't brand new books,
No.
have applied these teachings in their lives? And what inspires you to continue through even your organization to actually espouse these practices to be used for people in personal life and in their business life?
Well, I think, I mean, I was just surprised in general when my first book came out and people read it, and then that people started then taking the practices within it and starting to apply it to their day to day. Because for me, this was all coming out of personal experience. So, at this point, all of the work that I was writing about really had to do with, what I was seeing within my own life. And then people were interested in it. So I started teaching other people. And then the practices started helping them, which it was surprising to me. I don't know why, because they helped me so much, right? But so I think for me, the biggest piece is really seeing how it changes, family relationships, sibling relationships, how it brings, marriages that are, um, on the brink of divorce, either back together, or it creates a more conscious divorce, right? It creates a easier way of expressing and empowering a decision. So I also think, it's surprising to me how it really becomes, it's a daily practice, and it's a practice that I practice daily, but then to see other people start to implement it as such and just seeing what happens in their lives because of it, to me, it's just such a beautiful thing. And I had to share it because it was changing my life. And it's still something that I absolutely love. It's my passion to share this work with other people, right? Because I grew up, I was not a very good communicator. I was very passive aggressive, very judgmental. And because of these practices, my relationships, like I have a really wonderful relationship with my husband. I have a great open way of communicating with my kids. My relationship with my parents has changed because of it. With my sister has changed because of it. And to be able to share these practices and see it happen for other people, I mean, that to me is everything. It changes their lives, and then there's a ripple effect, and it changes other people's lives, and it just continues.
Well, I would say congratulations on bringing awareness through the trilogy series, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
As well. And it's really an important. So, for my listeners, we'll have links to all of these books on the show notes below. So, look down below and you'll see the links to Amazon. We'll also have a link to Cynthia's website, which I think it's just cynthiakane.com, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's CYNTHIAKANE.com. Just go there. You can learn more about her. And like I said, she is the founder of the Kane Intentional Communication Institute. So if you have interest in hiring her services to work inside of your company, do jot her a note through the website.
Yeah.
Get in touch with her or look her up on LinkedIn. We'll have a link to her LinkedIn profile as well. Cynthia, pleasure having you on to speak about the trilogy series and to give us a little bit of the fundamentals of what we need to know about communicating and our negative self talk, and really how to not be afraid of meditation. So, for those listeners who aren't doing it, give it a try, but you got to give it a try more than once. It's something
Yeah.
that you just have to go sit and be with it, and don't think it's weird, because ultimately in the end it's going to be just fine. It's just you kind of have to let it seep in a little bit. So namaste to you.
You
Thank you,
too.
Cynthia,
Thank
again, for being on the show a second time. Again, for all of my listeners, the podcast that's out about her other book is now out there, and it's podcast 215, The Pause Principle. Definitely check that out. That was a wonderful interview as well. Thanks so much. Namaste to you. Have a beautiful day.